I'm always happy to celebrate this kind of opening school mass, even though school starts in about a week or so. I always look forward to it for the energy and enthusiasm. Of course, I wish a lot more of you were here. But be that as it may, we have much to celebrate and much to look forward to. Many of you are very experienced with children. I won't say expert. Who can claim to be an expert on children? Many of you have your own children, grandchildren, and many of you have taught hundreds and hundreds of children and teens. So you know something about them. It's interesting that the image of a child comes up in our gospel today, and see if you can't identify from your experience what Jesus is talking about. His disciples ask him the question, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Now, it could be that they were seeing things through a worldly lens. And who's going to be powerful? Who's going to have status? You know, especially after the mother of James and John asked Jesus that her sons sit at his right and his left. But on the other hand, it could very well be a sincere question. The disciples wanted to know. If they couldn't be the greatest, well, then maybe they could be great. And with Jesus and near Jesus in the kingdom. And the kingdom of heaven, Jesus tells us about that in the parables. It was, he says, like a treasure found in a field, or a pearl of great price. You give all that you have to possess it, to obtain it. The kingdom of heaven is not a place. The kingdom of heaven is established in each one of our hearts. When God is the one around whom we order everything. We don't drop anything out of the ordering, but God is number one. And we order our thoughts, our words, our actions, in short, the entirety of our lives around the kingdom and its king. So the disciples asked this question, and then Jesus gives them a powerful visual aid. Good teacher that he is. A living parable. He calls a child over and places a child in the midst of the disciples and said, whoever humbles himself like this child is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And so important is this point that Jesus goes on to say that those who do not become humble like children will not even be able to enter the kingdom. What a shock this must have been to the disciples' ears. You know, in the hierarchical Jewish society of Jesus' day, children had no social status or significance. What was it about children that Jesus wanted the disciples and us to imitate? It is this, that children know and accept their true place in the divine order of reality. Children are simple and humble in this way. They live simply, and they have to trust that someone will take care of them. And for adults, after years of self-assertion and self-promotion, Jesus' words can introduce a hard truth. Saint Therese of Lisieux, the Little Flower, was inspired very much by this gospel passage. And it inspired what is known as her spirituality of the little way. Saint Therese felt overwhelmed in comparison to the famous saints of the Church. She aspired to be a saint, of course, but when she reflected on the lives of those saints, such as St. Clare today, she felt too small and weak to aspire to their heroic and venerable lives. So, in her prayer and through God's grace, she discovered what she called the little way, the way of spiritual childhood, which approaches Jesus always in trust and in surrender, like a small child completely dependent upon its parents or upon their teachers in a school. Living this way leads to experiencing and advancing God's kingdom. It means embracing and accepting our own littleness. We're not that important. And yes, our own weakness. We're all sinners. It means having a bold confidence in God's grace and mercy. It means relying upon Jesus to take our smallness and our weakness and to transform us into true greatness of living with humility, realizing that God is God and we are neither greater nor lesser than anyone else, student and teacher alike. It also means that the words of Jesus in the gospel should remind us of something. That all greatness is unrelated to the status that we may or may not have achieved. Made in God's image and likeness, we are neither winners nor losers on an earthly level. In God's divine wisdom, we're all winners, worthy indeed of the free gift of his love. True greatness, then, is linked to humility. Why is that? Because to be humble is to be like Jesus. To be great, really, is to be like Jesus, and Jesus was humble. Jesus, who was born in a stable, Jesus, who said he had nowhere to lay his head, Jesus, who celebrated the Last Supper in a borrowed room of a benefactor, Jesus, who was buried in a stranger's tomb. All of that shouts insignificance according to the world's standards. What kind of status is that? But we know that Jesus came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life, to lay down his life for many. With God's grace, you and I can lead simpler, humbler lives. May we always seek out the childlike qualities that will help us love God and others, and so further God's kingdom in our hearts. And now, with a slight shift of focus, I would like to say a few words to all of you who are engaged in Catholic education. First of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank our Office of Catholic Schools, priests, administrators, principals, faculty, and aides, all of those support staff, for carrying on so competently and with extraordinary dedication to pick up a shattered academic year and bring it to a wonderful completion. Very challenging circumstances, but your students learned and achieved and were promoted to the next grade level. Congratulations. It was a remarkable accomplishment. One of the things that should become evident by now is that the education of our young is an essential business. How could it not be? And teaching the young is an essential vocation, a calling. All of you have your particular role to play, whatever it may be. Parents especially. How instrumental the parents were in motivating and assisting their sons and daughters during the past academic year, and how they continue to remain engaged and want the best for their sons and daughters in entrusting them to you. I'm deeply grateful for your faith, for your example, for your zeal, for your students and your profession. I think they will be excited to meet their new teachers. And I'm sure they will be happy to see their former teachers too. You know, school started in Europe back in April in many countries in the midst of the COVID-19 situation. And the reports following those reopening of schools is very encouraging. And that should give us hope and confidence. But school personnel and students themselves and parents must never grow lackadaisical about safety protocols, the basic things. Students are precious, and so are you. So may we begin this year trusting that Jesus, the Good Shepherd, will be at our side to keep everyone healthy and safe. You can be sure that this is my prayer for you today and in the days ahead.